Okay, good evening. ITS832, Information Systems in a Global Economy, focusing on public policy and their impact. This is lecture number 6, our next to our last lecture. This class has gone by so fast. This will be posted as of August 5th. Actually, it's Sunday night the 4th. I'll probably have it posted tonight, but got some materials I want to gather to get ready for talking about dissertation. So we'll talk about it now, and I'll gather those resources and put them in a folder for you. So this week we're going to talk about compliance and how these laws that get passed affect the way we manage data, the way we actually implement the functionality of some of these information systems. I look forward to seeing the results of the discussion in your page and your papers this week. We're going to go over that topic a little bit. We'll talk about the discussion question. The written assignment is due next week, no more than 3 pages, and we'll discuss some dissertation resources. And your final research paper, I'm going to go ahead and post the instructions for that tonight. It's due in 2 weeks on August 18th, but it's due immediately. I'll start grading, and I have to post final grades by that Wednesday, so I can't accept, late assignments aren't accepted during the whole term, but really, I can't accept anything late on the final project. So, and then I'll conclude. I don't expect this lecture to take very long. You may hear an alarm go off while I'm talking. Let's see, and we'll get started here. Okay, compliance issues. So I want to focus your discussion and your research paper, your papers this week on how information systems effectively support our compliance with the laws. There, some laws inject functionality that you must do a certain thing. So is that enacted through the requirements? I've got an article you'll see in the resources I'm posting that talks about how to inject compliance issues and regulatory compliance into the requirements process of systems development. So I want to focus. We've had a hard time. We've talked a lot about the legislation in generalities, in very general terms. And let's get past that this week and talk about the information systems and their implementation. This is not a policy PhD, it's an IT PhD. So just briefly touch on the policy, but then let's get into, no kidding, how information systems support the reporting or visibility or auditability or transparency that it takes to show compliance with these laws. Okay, some examples of legislation that have a heavy compliance overhead, and I'm not going to go into these in terrible depth because many of you have more expertise in these than I do, and I look forward to hearing your discussion or reading your discussion and your papers. HIPAA is huge in compliance. So health information systems, health informatics, as several of you know, has its own compliance regimen. So in your discussion this week, tell us about it. Tell us share with us your professional experience of how these laws impacted you as you went through systems implementation, system maintenance, upgrades, different versions of software. And in your discussion question, be personable, be personal. Don't just pontificate and talk about things in general. Use the I word. I developed a system. I engineered a solution. I tested the compliance. I worked with regulators. Tell us your experience. Don't just speak in generalities. Another one that we haven't talked about too much, but I know some of you are in the finance, accounting, banking area. Uh, Publicly traded companies, particularly the finances, the accounting of publicly traded companies, is heavily regulated by Sarbanes-Oxley, which came out after the Enron scandal, and it levied several requirements. Some of it was criminal penalties on lying scumbag C-level executives. Um, so if you've been involved in any form at all of complying with SOX from an information system standpoint, uh, share that with us and what you had to do, what you went through, what it was like. Um, and as always, we're looking for good sources in the literature as well. But let us know how that affected you. I was doing a little bit of reading and research for this in preparation for this lecture, and I also found a really good piece that I'll share with you um, regarding critical infrastructure protection. Um, and and public and private. Some of it is requirements, laws, regulations levied on federal agencies in the U.S., and some of it is levied on private entities like the stock market, securities exchange, banking, finance, because those are key critical parts of our economy. If the economy goes, your national power goes. So I'm going to create a materials folder in the week 6 content area, and I'm going to drop these articles in there. Check back on it again midweek because I'm not quite done. There will be another some links and some other documents that I have found and that I have in my own library. I may not get to all of that tonight. Okay, so those are compliance issues. Those are examples. There's certainly more. If it, we've talked about data protection till literally we're kicking a dead horse. So data protection, privacy. Let's try and get past that somewhat, if we can. Okay, so our week 4 discussion topic. I want you. You might repeat information from the personal uh, assignment, personal connection, a practical connection assignment. Um, Many of you didn't really connect what you were writing about to your current career at all. So this is a chance to redeem yourself by talking about a law or regulation that affects you as an information systems professional. For example, in my last position um, as a records and information management professional, I had to comply with the Federal Records Act, which I'm pretty sure it's been 7 years. I'm pretty sure that was Title 40. And there were CFR parts of the Code of Federal Regulations. That's another term for you to become familiar with if you haven't already, based on this course. Is there's federal law, which is Title 10, Title 11 of the United States Code, Title 9 USC, yada yada yada, talks about that's federal law. But then you'll see the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and what those are those are regulations enacted by federal agencies like Um, the Veterans Administration. I'm currently going through the process of getting my computer programming school authorized to accept uh, GI Bill funding from United States service members, veterans. And the Code of Federal Regulations, I believe it's 36, Chapter 36, Part 36, that governs what my school has to look like in order to accept veterans funding. So choose a law, choose a regulation that affects you. Those two are something I could have written about: Federal Records Act, records management, or veterans funding. Those both affect me as an information systems professional. The former Federal Records Act affected an IT implementation. I had to implement a an approved records electronic records management. I'm sorry, ERM, an electronic records management application, ERMA, and IRMA, that complied with um, DoD regs in order to be compliant with my records management program. So that's something I could discuss that affected me. So in your discussion, 3 sections, please copy and paste these into your discussion. A brief description of the law or regulation, maybe a paragraph that just talks about what it's regulating, what the requirement is. And then what work you performed in the conduct of your duties, in the conduct of your career, to shape an information system to support compliance reporting. What did you do uh, to make that information system a little bit different so that it would make proving that you are compliant with that regulation easier, cheaper? Maybe all you had to do was enable auditing so that you could pop those audit logs out and hand them to a regulator to show that you, like for security, that you're checking invalid logins or whatever the case may be. What did you do to shape that information system? It could be custom reporting. It could be user permissions to so that only certain people could approve certain workflows. It could be anything. This is your discussion. This is your research to do. Your introspection to do, to think about your career and how you complied with a regulation. And then the third section is, how could you use this experience you went through in a research project? And again, don't just go out there and find something that talks in vague generalities. Write write this discussion question in a Word document that has no text in it, no text whatsoever, and then paste these 3 bullets that I have here on this PowerPoint slide into that Word document, and then answer these questions writing completely in your own words, and it will be magical. How much better the discussion will go, because when you write originally based on your own experience, other people will be able to ask you questions. They'll be able to say, "Oh gosh, uh, when you were doing that, what tool did you use, or what part of the process did you play, or how did you test that functionality was working, or how's that going for you now that maybe that happened in the past? Uh, was it effective?" You won't just be ping ponging back and forth pieces of meaningless text that you found on the internet. It'll actually be a collegial conversation about reality, your real learned experiences, and an actual discussion. Uh, it'll be magical. You'll love it. Let's try it this week. Okay. So that's the discussion. 3 parts. Paste those into your response, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Okay, the written assignments due next Sunday night, due August 11th. For this, we're going to do, it's sort of a literature review. It should help you as you're reviewing literature in support of, future classes and particularly your dissertation. I want you to go out and find 2 cases, 2 case studies. This could be it could be in practitioner, it could be in a white paper that's published by a consulting firm that helps somebody. This isn't necessarily something you're going to find in a peer-reviewed journal article, and that's okay. You can cite a web page in APA format. You don't have to just paste the URL into your paper. There's a format for citing web pages and white papers and whatnot. But find 2 case studies that examine an information systems implementation. So this will be 2 different implementations that were affected, at least in part, by a need to comply with a federal law or regulation. So use this. We're talking about one law, one regulation. It should be something you're familiar with. Some of you are experts in health information systems. It's fine to use HIPAA. Try not to reuse your own content. I have a reuse policy in the syllabus. And if you do reuse something you've already submitted in this course or a previous one, there's a statement you have to make. So please comply with that. But in 2 or 3 pages, 3 pages max, 2 pages minimum, describe the law or regulation in general terms. And then in those 2 case studies, so that'll be 1 section. And then you'll have 2 more sections, case study 1, case study number 2. Describe what the systems engineers did differently that enabled the organization to show that it complied with the law or regulation that you're dealing with. So there will be case studies out there. You'll likely find more of these on a normal Google search than you will on a Google Scholar search or in a library search of scholarly databases. If you have questions on what I'm looking for in the discussion or in the paper, shoot me an email. I check my email every day. I've received virtually no questions on what I'm looking for in advance of these. I think I might have gotten 2 questions. So feel free to shoot me an email if you're not, if you've got an idea of what you're doing, you got an outline maybe you want me to take a look at, and I'll let you know. And it does take some research to find the articles, the sources for these 2, the discussion and the paper. Okay, you will see a folder in week 6 where I'm putting some dissertation resources, and just like the compliance issues materials folder, this will grow. I'm going to put things out there, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what a research question is. You will see a research question in scholarly literature. You will have a research question that you will answer in your dissertation. I'll post my dissertation. You can read my research question and all of these things, problem, purpose state. You can read my literature, my chapter 2. Hopefully you already have browsed it. I posted it previously in the course. But your research question is the singular focus of your project. The research question is a gap in the literature that you substantiate via the literature. Some recent author will say, we need more research on how much HIPAA compliance is costing. And they may go into some more detail regarding what it's costing individual practitioners, what it's costing patients, what it's costing the federal government to assure. How much is the government spending to enforce HIPAA compliance? Health and Human Services probably has a tab on that. So that's a research question. You know how much how are two things correlated? Um, what is the cost of complying with SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley? What 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 mechanisms have shown to be effective in auditing security logs? Uh, there's any number of things in an IT um, doctorate that you could explore, but all of them will have a foundational research question. What is the most effective algorithm for machine learning to solve problem X, Y, or Z? There's everything will have a research question, but you have to relate that to some sort of problem. There's a real world reason. You'll see this in the literature. There's an applicability. It's in different formats, but you'll see an applicability to um, reality, an applicability to practitioners, and how this research might be used to solve a real world problem. Every once in a while, you'll see folks doing pure research on absolutely theoretical issues, but that's rarely something. Information systems exist to solve practical real world problems. So you'll rarely see original research on something that has no identifiable use. But you might. But anyway, probably not. But this is the framework for my dissertation. It may not be exactly the same for Cumberland's, but it's a useful framework. You see journal articles written this way, so it's fairly generic and widely applicable. And then there's a purpose statement of the research. It's to identify or propose a new way forward. Sometimes it'll be proposing a new theory. In some of my sources in my dissertation, if you go to my reference list, you'll see toward a theory of, and like Dr. Leonardi, Paul Leonardi, one of the main researchers in my dissertation area, enterprise social media, proposed a theory of toward a theory of information visibility that helps groups collaborate. So there's a purpose for research, and that you'll have that clear statement. I'll post some research, some resources on how that stuff. Reviewing literature. If you go out to a regular Google, if you go to your dissertation textbooks, your methodology textbooks, reviewing literature. There's a reason, there's a way. You're reviewing literature to answer a certain question or to address a certain topic. And when you talk about literature, you don't use the author's words. You don't just mention the article and rephrase what they said. You discuss the literature in the context of a story that you're telling, and you use the literature to identify your point. I looked up this week maybe half a dozen references that different students made where they would make a statement. They would say cloud computing requires more regulation, and they would cite a source. And I believe it was 6 for 6 of the ones that I checked. The article that they cited had absolutely nothing with cloud computing needing more regulation. So as you move forward, your dissertations will be published. They'll be reviewed by doctors and they'll be scrutinized, and it'll have the name of the university on it. When you cite something, make sure that the article you're citing has some verbiage in there. You might have seen, if you saw in my feedback, I don't see where your article reinforces this point. Please email me and let me know how the article reinforced your point, and how you were using it to reinforce your point. Um, Sometimes it's like you're going through the motions where, oh well, I'll make a statement and here's a reference, click clack, here's and listing in my references, and there I'm done. But if it doesn't make any sense, if it doesn't actually contain something that reinforces your point, it's not academically rigorous. You'll never get published in a peer-reviewed article because they go through and they check all of your sources. Every time you cite something, a reviewer, a good reviewer for an established journal, will go find what it was about that, and they'll verify that the journal article you mentioned actually backs up your sources. So when you're reviewing literature and you're using literature to substantiate what you're saying, make sure that the author of that source actually said that, or came to that conclusion, had those findings. Um, and then I'll go ahead and post the template that I used in my dissertation. Cumberland's will be different, but this template's got in within the sections of the dissertation template, there's explanations as to why it has those sections. Now that, like I said, Cumberland's, Capella, CTU, University of Phoenix, all have different templates, different ways of going about it. But if you look, the dissertation, they're all the same. The chapters are the same. The intent is the same. So use these templates for what they're worth. Don't start filling them out as if they came from the University of the Cumberlands, but you might find them useful. So as you move forward with your dissertation, um, make sure that what you are forming complies with these. And if I post some materials and you read it and you have no idea what I'm talking about, send me an email. Feel free to ask me questions about these dissertation resources. I'll try to cover it in the final lecture. Like next week, we're talking about telecommunications uh, policy and how that affected, like, the cable TV system, the telephone system, the Telecommunications Act of 96, TA 96, broke up the Bell system, and and created the internet, as Al Gore likes to take credit for. We'll also talk about net neutrality and whatever other public policy items I can come up with. But if you have questions and anything about your dissertation journey, if you're worried, if you're concerned, if you think you have an area, if you think you have a research question or a research topic and you want me to take a look at it, send me an email. I'll check it out and I'll email you back. Um, so look for a folder on dissertation resources, and then week 6 materials. I've got some articles more specific to this week's assignments. Okay, so the final research paper. I want you guys to get as much warning on this as possible. It's fairly wide open. If you have any doubts that you're going down the wrong road, email me. Email me sooner than later. Okay, this is as promised in lecture number 1. Your final research paper is really a proposal. I want you to propose a new policy to fill a gap, but you're going to take 5 pages to get there and complete it. No more than 7, no less than 5, and again, not including the title page and your references. APA formatting. I want this to be absolutely original. If I sense nonsensical rewording and I start seeing phrases that are obviously not something that you would actually say, you won't get through the course. This paper's 400 points, of 1,000. Write originally. If there are grammatical issues, we can get past that. But write simply, write plainly, No rewording. Don't quote according to Smith and then a sentence of somebody else's writing. No direct quotes. This is your writing. Anybody can cut and paste material. It doesn't take a PhD student to do that. Control C, Control V is for junior high school students. So let's get beyond that on this paper. Um, Original writing, your own writing, put in context, and use resources to support what you're saying. For this final research paper, I'm going to have 2 pages. I'm sorry. I'm going to have 2 days to grade these. If I see you cite a source, um, and I check it, and it has nothing to do with what you said, because you're gonna substantiate these gaps in the literature. So you'll have a citation that says, according to Smith, 2019, more research is needed in, uh, um, or more policy is needed in privacy, artificial intelligence, whatever your topic is. We've gone through this before. We've talked about this at length. But when you describe your gaps in current laws or regulations regarding your chosen area of technology, information technology, use the literature to substantiate those gaps. Make sure that the researcher, an established author, has identified a gap in current laws. Okay, so don't get creative. Don't use your opinion in identifying the gap. Find the gap in the literature. It takes lots and lots and lots of reading and time. And you've got to be able to get to the full source. I recommend Google Scholar, but the library has a lot of stuff as well. But cite a source that says we have a gap in current laws or regulations. The federal government, the state, whatever it is, needs to go back to the drawing board and provide more guidance in the area of X, Y, or Z, whatever your chosen technology is. Again, you can reuse some of your previous work in this paper, no more than 25%. Let me know if you're doing that in a statement. Okay, now this last section, I encourage you to be creative. Don't use, I think we should, and then recommend a new policy. And I've got a typo here. I've got a typo here. I'm gonna change this right here. Your recommendations for new policy. Your recommendations for new policy. I was thinking about the week 6 material. This should say for recommendations for future policy. I had week 6 topic on the brain. So don't focus on what you're seeing during this lecture. I'll change these slides and post it. Your recommendations for future policy. How would you fill that gap? Okay. Oh no, I see where I was going with this. Okay. Propose a policy that would fill the gap as identified in the literature. And then you're going to have 2 subsections. How would you measure compliance with your proposed new policy? How would you measure? Yeah, that's where I was going. How would you measure compliance with your proposed policy? And then how might a future researcher do a research project on that? What's the cost of your they could measure, future researchers could measure the cost of this new policy. Future researchers could research the effectiveness of your policy by looking at certain factors. So this is where, yes, you can get creative on this proposing a new policy. Some of you have already done this in class discussion. Some of you have already done this in your papers. So, like I said, it's okay to readdress, but go into more detail. Almost none of these previous papers are going to go into as much detail as a 5-page final research paper. So I apologize for confusing myself. I wrote this up this afternoon, and yes, propose a policy that would fill this gap, and then include your recommendations for measuring the compliance for that. How do you measure compliance? Good. And a future project that would shed light on the policy's costs, impact, success, failure. And again, feel free to be creative on that. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. And that is due in 2 weeks. If I confused you, but because I was confused, I confused myself. If I've confused you, please send me an email, and I'll go into more detail, and I'll try not to confuse you further. Okay. Conclusion. All of these laws that have an information systems spin to them affect information systems in how we show that we are complying with those laws. And as you will see in this week's discussion, people have different experience in their careers with how they changed information systems to show that compliance. Final lecture is next week, and it's going to be on telecommunications, the internet, moving data around. And hopefully you will have asked me questions about dissertations and research projects and how you're going to get through that and how you're going to avoid the situation of being all but dissertation, which is an area you don't want to be in. I'm helping someone right now that got through their coursework and did not make sufficient progress on their dissertation. So they've been 5 years since they finished their coursework. They've been ABD. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Okay, that's it for this week. Look for those materials. And again, email me with any questions or concerns. And good night.